Jon Alba's here. His hair is not done, so he will not be appearing on camera. From SI's The Takedown and not baseball talk, Jon Alba, how are you doing, buddy?
Who likes sports talk?
I mean,
Everyone.
apparently our audience enough to hang out with us for an hour as we've talked no wrestling. So
Anyone,
our audience hates wrestling. It's great. They follow our suit.
any loser who only likes talking about sports for a living is a nut
Do you want to
job.
talk about the Red Sox trade? I know you're a huge Red
I
Sox
saw,
fan.
I saw some people that said they're like, "Oh, you don't like sport." I'm like, bro, it's a bit. Everything here is a bit.
Yeah,
Nothing
what are
here
we doing
hasn't
on
been a
this?
bit.
Yeah.
The
This
only
whole
thing
show's a bit. Are you kidding me?
we can talk about whatever you want to talk about, my dude.
Well, let's talk
Glad
about
to hear
this.
you're doing a little better, by the way. I miss you.
Eh,
I do. I was thinking about you the other day. I was going to
oh, that's
check in, and
unfortunate.
then I had to work on this lawsuit story. So
I
yeah.
understand. I understand. No, I got knocked with COVID. I'm pretty sure I got it at the Kendrick Lamar concert, but well worth it.
Mm.
Well worth it to go to see Kendrick Lamar and
Kung Fu Kenny.
get COVID. It'll be all right. All right. So you broke this news yesterday, Jon Alba, that AEW and Jon Moxley are being sued for negligence, civil assault, and battery by a production crew member. It happened at AEW Dynamite in 2023, where a production crew member he got pushed over during I believe it was the Blood and Guts, and it was an unplanned.
It was a cage match between Kenny
yeah,
Omega.
Moxley versus
okay.
Omega.
Okay, my fault. And he got pushed over, and it was an unplanned spot, and he's filed this lawsuit. Tell us what's going on here.
Well, there's a lot of ground on that front.
Well, I know. I'd rather you explain it than me.
No, I mean he's being sued, and AEW is being sued for a negligent civil assault and battery regarding the incident. The plaintiff, Christopher Dispenza, who had been doing production work for and with AEW since their inception through another outside company, broadcast service group that hires production people for AEW. He was handing Moxley a screwdriver for a spot because that was when they were doing the whole Don Callis, Kenny Omega screwdriver bit that continued for 2 years. And Dispenza claims that the script only called for Moxley to just grab the screwdriver from him. But then if you watch it on video, Moxley very clearly shoves him and he takes a fall. And he claims as a result that he suffered some pretty severe injuries as a result of it that required cervical fusion surgery, shoulder surgery, other ailments as well. I presented the lawsuit, but then I also spoke with his attorneys. I spoke with people within AEW, and then AEW officially on the record would not provide comment on ongoing litigation. But, in the lawsuit, they categorize Moxley as having a history of disciplinary issues, but the individuals that I spoke with at a pretty high level in AEW on background said they had no idea what that was referring to, and that he's looked at pretty highly within the company, and that the lawsuit alleges that AEW was negligent in hiring and training Moxley. So obviously, Moxley has 20 plus years of experience in the wrestling industry, but I think it's more so calling training for this particular spot that it's referring to. It's a very convoluted lawsuit. There's definitely things that to the casual person may feel like a stretch, but what people, when they read this stuff and follow this stuff and consume this stuff, have to understand is that in the eye of the law, very specific things that might seem like a minor technicality could very much make something fall within its parameters or whatever it may be. So, that's where it pretty much stands right now. And he's seeking damages exceeding at least $25,000. I saw a lot of people running with that number, $25,000. That's just in order for it to not be in a civil small claims court, the numerical value of the damages has to exceed $25,000, and he's saying that it exceeds that. So it could be a lot more than that. It could be around that. We don't really know. I think they're just seeking damages in general.
Did he continue to work with AEW after this spot?
Yes, he continued to work with them. He did not file an incident report. He took it up with a few people that night, including Doc Sampson, AEW's psychologist and a member of the training staff. And he said he was getting treatment from the training staff, but then was told that he no longer was going to get treatment. He alleges that the higher-ups in AEW were aware of the incident, but it was never discussed. And he had a meeting with AEW General Counsel Chris Peck and Tony Khan at some point several months later, but they never discussed the actual incident, and they just discussed future full-time employment opportunities, but nothing came of those.
Do you know the last time he worked with AEW?
December 2024.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. All this is off the top of my head, so I apologize. But
No.
Yeah, that was that's where things ended for him in terms of he hasn't worked with them since then.
Okay. SP3, you got anything?
Does the fact that he continued to work with AEW after the incident work against him in any way, from what you know?
Look, I don't want to sit here and editorialize, how I think the law is going to handle a situation like that. I have no idea. Again, I just know the facts of what the lawsuit claims, what he's alleging, and he did continue to work for AEW. I mean, the one thing I'll say is that a lot of civil suits, I've seen a lot of people like, well, it took 2 years. A lot of civil suits can take years to unfold. People sue for car accidents 5+ years after they happen. That's because a lot of times with stuff like that, you don't necessarily know what the damages are until a few years later. So if he's claiming that he sustained these injuries as a result of this incident, it could take a couple of years for you to truly know the extent of your injuries from something. So I think that's a potential reason why that may have taken so long. But also, like, legal processes just in general take time. So I'm not terribly surprised by the timeline. It seems like a lot of people were. Like I said, I think there's a lot of things on the surface that seem like, oh, that might hold up in court or that might not hold up in court. But we don't even know if something like this will actually get to court. It's very possible that there's settlement talks at some point or something of that nature. And it's also a complicated situation because two parties are getting sued here and the two parties are still working together, Jon Moxley and AEW, right? And then also there's the tricky water of there's certain parts of the lawsuit where it talks about like employee of AEW, and then there's certain parts of it where it talks about like contracted employee, and like Moxley is not an employee of AEW. He's technically by classification independent contractor. So there's a lot of small nuances like that again, I don't think a lot of people are diagnosing and looking into when it comes to talking about this altogether.
Oh, and there's all the armchair lawyers on social media that should not be listened to.
Yeah, well, I was a little annoyed because I saw a lot of people like trying to break it down yesterday, and like, and that's fine. Like, you want to talk about it, I understand that. But man, like, I spent like a week working on that thing, and I just hope that if people want to talk about it, read the report in full, read the lawsuit, read the claim. I added a ton of additional reporting to it in terms of who I spoke with. And so, because like you don't want to be sharing misinformation, right? Like you don't want, especially with a precarious legal situation, where I can't remember the last time we saw something like this on a mainstream stage. There was that time that Hogan choked out that TV presenter on television after the guy like goaded him into putting him into sleeper hold to prove that wrestling was fake. But you don't see it too much where on like a mainstream stage, on live television, in an episode of the show, but we have clear evidence that this actually happened, right? Like, I mean, it happened. It's just a matter of what were the circumstances around it.
When it comes to the disciplinary issues that are listed in the lawsuit, and you mentioned that the production member has alleged that Moxley has a history of disciplinary issues, and then AEW just was like, we don't have any knowledge of that. Would that be something that there would be some sort of record of like, hey, this person has filed this complaint to Jon Moxley? Like, I'm just wondering why he would say he has a history of this, why Dispensa would say he has a history of this, if that's not something that can honestly be like proven.
Yeah, if you give me 1 second, I don't want to speak out of both sides of my mouth here when I say this. I believe, yeah, okay. So in count 1, which is negligent hiring, training, supervision, retention, they mention in bullet point 19, the past disciplinary offenses by defendant Moxley include a documented history of unpredictability as well as a lack of control by defendant AEW, all of which were known or should have been known to the defendant AEW at the time of this assault. So they're very clearly alleging that within AEW, during his time in AEW, Moxley had documented incidents of, what's the term, unpredictability as well as lack of control. This is me speaking as a reporter right now. In my time covering AEW, I personally have never heard of any documented history of issues with Jon Moxley in that sense. And the individuals I spoke with, again, pretty high-level people in AEW, had no knowledge of this either. That's not to say it didn't happen. I don't know. Maybe there is stuff that, that never got to the public realm. We all know that Jon had a very public bout, with alcohol that caused him to go seek help and take time away. Maybe that's what they're pointing to. I don't know. Again, I'm not even speculating because I truly don't know what they're referring to, because none of that was ever across my radar. And as I mentioned, him leaving to seek treatment, that was a very public thing. That was not something that was like a private thing. They talked about that on the television show, for crying out loud. So I'm not really sure where that came from altogether.
I have to ask about this because I've seen a lot of people kind of put this all into one. Of course, a notable AEW star, Ricochet, tweeted about the whole lawsuit. Is there any way that, and he did delete the tweet right afterwards, is there any way that could be used against AEW in this lawsuit?
I mean, again, I don't want to editorialize on how the justice system would play out, but if the company's official stance is that they don't comment on legal issues and then a talent comments on the legal issues, there's probably a good reason that was deleted pretty quickly. If you just connect some dots there. That's pretty much how I draw it. I don't want to say what would hurt or what wouldn't hurt. I have no idea. None of us know. But I think that it's a situation where they probably don't want to add fuel to the fire. And it's funny, I saw a lot of people like, oh, Tony has to totally make this a work now with Moxley's character. Like, dude, this is active litigation going on. Like, God, take off the hat for a second and realize that there's like real life ramifications of doing something like that.
Yeah, turning it into a work. Not everything's a work.
Not folks. Everything needs to be a work.
No.
God.
This is not the one.
Stupid. Let's not be dumb about this. That's why the Ricochet tweet is like
what we do on our show.
All part of the
all
show.
The show.
Gracious.
Don't be dumb about these things. Just especially active lawsuits. Just let
it play out
where it needs to play out, which is not a television show. What are we doing? Or on Twitter, because nothing needs to play out on Twitter. God forbid. Anything else, John, that you want to make sure that's talked about when it comes to the lawsuit?
No, again, I think people just need to because you're right. There's a lot of armchair lawyers and doctors all of a sudden, right? It's like, well, that fall, there's no way he could have gotten that hurt off that fall. It's like, first off, we truly don't know the extent of what his injuries were or what his previous body was, previous health was like, or what it's been like since. What I'll say as someone who has taken bumps and all that stuff, like if you're not planning to fall, and I mean, anyone can relate, right? Like if you're not planning to fall, a very easy slip could be very damaging, or it could be nothing too. Sammy Sosa threw his back out sneezing, anything can happen on a minor action. So I think people discounting the defendant or the plaintiff just because of that is silly and very uninformed. But again, that's not to say, everything he's saying is truthful. We don't know. And that's going to be up to the court of law to determine that if it gets there. Or if there's a settlement made, then there's a settlement made, and I just thought there was a lot of assuming going on about both sides, and that bothers me. I figured that would happen because it's wrestling discourse and a lot of people want to be experts. I also think that there are probably a lot of people blowing the story into something much bigger than it is. And then I think there were people who were trying to downplay it as a nothing burger. And I don't think it's either of those things. I think it's somewhere in between, because the reality is this is a production crew member who is not a trained wrestler, who on camera was shoved down in a way that seemingly injured him. And there's concrete proof of it happening. Everyone can see it. It happened on live television in front of millions of people. So, what kind of precedent does that set going forward for wrestling? Look, hopefully it's something we learn from and are much more careful going forward now, where in wrestling, no one who's not a trained wrestler should be taking or put in a position to be touched, right? Like it just shouldn't happen. And I think logic would tell you that Moxley was in character and he got carried away with what he did, and now it's just how do you maneuver that. So curious what type of precedent that it sets more than anything.
We shall see. It'll play out in court, or it'll potentially get settled out of it. Great job just on the story.
Thanks, dude.
Overall,
yes,
John. I saw this yesterday.
Yes, great job, John.
Appreciate it, man.
Appreciate you joining us here.